Hi, folks, and welcome to White Collar Week. It's the isolation that destroys us. The solution is in community. Today on the podcast, we have David Israel and Spencer Oberg, two successful entrepreneurs who both served time in prison. You might know them by their vegan cheese company, Good Planet Foods, or by their media company, Unincarcerated. In this episode, we certainly go into David and Spencer's pre-prison backstories, but more, we learn the nuts and bolts of how to be an entrepreneur and how to succeed after prison. The hard work it takes, how to analyze your strengths and weaknesses, and how to get past the shame to find your authenticity. So coming up, the entrepreneurs, David Israel and Spencer Oberg, on White Collar Week. I hope you will join us. Hello, and welcome to White Collar Week, a podcast sponsored by Progressive Prison Ministries, the world's first ministry serving the white-collar justice community. I'm Jeff Grant, co-founder and your host. I served almost 14 months in a federal prison for a white-collar crime I committed when I was a lawyer, so I know that it's the isolation that kills us, and the solution is in community. So let's get started. Hi, folks, and welcome to White Collar Week. We have two very special guests. Today we have David Israel and Spencer Oberg. They're both entrepreneurs and have been very successful since their release from prison. Also successful prior to in different ways. And we're going to let them tell a little bit of their backstories, especially as it relates to their entrepreneurial journey to Good Planet Foods, which is a vegan cheese company on the West Coast, and also their strategy and vision for Unincarcerated, which I think is a media company and meant to tell stories and advance criminal justice reform throughout the country. So, David, Spencer, welcome to White Collar Week.
Thank you, Jeff. Good to be here.
David, why don't we start with you? I've seen both of your Unincarcerated podcasts where you go deep into your backgrounds. And David, I'm hoping what you can do in 4 or 5 minutes is just kind of bring us up through your, I know it's a big story, but bring us up through kind of your release. Because then I want to know, we want to get to where you and Spencer met each other and then how you launched post-prison into the latest stages of your entrepreneurial journey.
Okay, 4 or 5 minutes. I'm going to talk quick. So, I mean, as you know, look, I've really worked for myself since I was 19. Been in a lot of different businesses, which at first seemed like a lot because I was all over the place. I was moving from nightclub to foreign cars to jewelry. But you know what? At the end of the day, it's an amazing education because I'm doing so many different things and learning how to work with a lot of different people. So as much as I wanted to go to college, and I did leave college after 2 years because I thought I was making so much money. I was wanting to go back, but I felt I should have that. But at the end of the day, when I was in the jewelry industry, I started with a company called, oh, no, I did not. I started with a jewelry store where a partner of mine who had a family business here sold and wanted to open a new store. And I tagged along with him, and I actually put every penny I had into it. And what happened was we opened in a mall in northern Seattle, which was a pretty decent mall at the time. But the store didn't do very well. And after about 9 months of being there, we're doing okay at best. The Nordstrom shuts down and moves out. Frederick & Nelson's, which was a Marshall Field, the other anchor, moves out. All the other stores are starting to close down. And we're like, uh-oh, this is a problem. And what happens is that problem turns out to be a blessing because, as we learned, the reason they're not moving out, the landlord's not re-signing them and trying to get them out because Home Depot and Costco want to build there. So the one great thing is we signed a long lease. So that lease turned out to be very valuable and we made a lot of money on it. And when we sold that for about a year and a half, all these jewelers started calling me because they're always cash strapped, right? Very hard to get financing in the jewelry business, especially if you're mom and pop, because you can move your inventory around or you don't own your inventory or whatever. So I start loaning them money, but I'm taking collateral. So it grows into a business. I create a company called First Funds, and I start lending money to all types of businesses, not just jewelry, but precious metal, rare coin companies, pawn shops start calling me. And, as I'm lending money to these pawn shops, I'm thinking to myself, man, they treat their customers like crap. Their stores look like garbage, or like poor thrift shops.
Yeah.
Everything's overpriced. Their hours are bad. And I'm just like, but they're making bank, they're making a lot of money. I can tell they have a lot of cash. So, but they can't get financing. So I came in and I ended up being a pawn shop for pawn shops. I take collateral against my loans. And after about a year of doing that, I pick up a Fortune magazine one day and I read about this company out of Texas called Cash America. And they went public, and the article is just so glowing about their stocks going through the roof. They're consolidating moms and pops. They're turning them into retail stores, and they have a picture. And I thought to myself, you know what? I need to do this, and I need to do it quickly because I want to grow faster than them, or I want to grow and have them gobble me up. So, I flew down. I knew nothing about pawn shops other than what I saw. I flew down to Texas. I looked at all their stores, in the Dallas area, videotaped them, came back, went back again, did some more diligence. And I came back and I talked to a friend of mine's father who was very sophisticated investor, dialed in with the who's who in Seattle. He goes, well, you need to raise some capital and you need to just replicate what they do. So basically, you're a target. So I did. I opened my first store, sold my house to open my first store. My wife was not thrilled, but she supported me. And I opened my first store. And you know what? Literally, you could have come and all you had to do was change the sign, and you could open a Cash America. It was just, I did everything exactly. The counters were the same. The floors were the same. The paint was the same. Just the name and the logo was different.
Yeah.
But it was built to be a Cash America. So, look, I really didn't know what I was doing, Jeff. I mean, I could have, we opened our doors and literally the first guy that came in with a Sawzall. I never even saw a Sawzall before. So he's like, I want to borrow. I'm like, well, how much did you want to borrow? And he's like, well, I need X, I'm like, I'm like, hold on. And I went in the back room and I called another pawn shop and pretended I was a guy. I'm like, hey, I have a model, something or other. How much would you guys loan me on it? And of course, the guy's a jerk, he's like, well, hold it up to the phone. I can't see it. I'm like, okay, pal. I go, just give me a ballpark. So he gave me a ballpark and I went out and made my first loan on a tool. So I had a lot to learn. At any rate, we grew that company very quickly. I actually, about 4 months into the business, I allowed my childhood friend who came from a family with some money who didn't enjoy what he was doing, come and join me. And I sold him 30% of the company. He invested a substantial amount of money so we could continue to grow. He came and joined me, and we built that into 9 stores over a 3-year period. It was really fast growth.
Yeah.
And they were just, great team, beautiful stores. I was getting accolades in the press. I was winning, awards from the business community. And my 3rd year, I raised capital from Howard Schultz, the founders of Costco, both boards of Starbucks and Costco. And the goal was to go ahead and build this. And not about 7 months after raising that capital.
How much capital did you raise?
At the time, $4 million.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it was a lot at the time, especially from a group like that. So we knew we were on the fast track. And, I went from being a kid that, had no money and growing up envious of people and wanting to be somebody, to being hanging out now and meeting with Howard and Jeff Brotman to smoke cigars, in the evenings or on the weekends. And I'm thinking, I'm the man, right? It's I'm building an ego here at this point, right? So anyway, about 7 months after raising the capital, I get a rumbling that we're being investigated by Seattle police. I'm like, okay. So I call the Seattle police. I go, hey, something up? Anything, no, just your bunch of baloney. shit happens. People are mad at you for being successful. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, let me know, right? Following week, it's about 5 p.m. in the afternoon, I get a call from a store manager at our first store, and he says, hey, the police and a prosecutor are here with a search warrant, and they want to take our computer and our records. I said, okay. I said, well, give it to them. I said, and anyway, some detective gets on. He goes, hey, we're going to take. I said, well, we're happy to provide you with whatever you need. I said, any chance you can get the information you need and download it so we can be in business tomorrow? Because that's going to shut us down. And they're like, oh, sure, no problem, right? I'm like, well, you can have whatever you need. Anyway, so obviously there's something going on. We contact our company attorneys. We have no clue. But 2 weeks later, I get something. It's like a parking ticket, one of those summons for a hearing.
Yeah.
For receiving stolen property for me, right? Then my partner disappears for 2 days and reappears and wants to meet me. So I'm like, okay, something's up here, right?
This is your old friend.
My childhood friend.
Your childhood friend.
Yes, a very close best friend. There was three of us we called us the Three Musketeers. We were so tight. Mm-hmm. Yeah, any rate, he had a memory lapse and couldn't recall anything that happened. But apparently, our third month in business at our first store, we had bought some merchandise, and the guy that sold us some of that merchandise he was already in prison, but he's about to get charged with something else, nothing related to this.
Yeah.
He said, hey, I got the story. And this guy was my ringleader. And I went out, my group and I went out and stole stuff, whatever, robbed people. And he would take it from us. Right. So
he said he said you were his fence.
More like I was the ringleader.
Oh,
yeah.
I see. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was the big guy. Right. I was the godfather. So, end of the day, I hired an attorney. The attorney calls the prosecutor. The prosecutor says, okay, you know what? Here's the deal. It's 90 days receiving stolen property. So my guy's like, okay, 90 days. I said, no, not going to do it. Not intentional, not going to happen. So brakes got put on, we started going back and forth. Then they raised it to conspiracy, which covered everything that these guys, every crime they committed. And they gave, oh gosh, what do they call it? They gave
immunity.
Thank you. Immunity to everybody. My partner, people that committed the crimes, everybody but David. And it was like, let's go after this guy. And it was the media then. I mean,
yeah.
I just, had been in the media for winning all these business awards and for having this great story. So I had, once that happened, I resigned from my company. I wanted to protect my investors, which in hindsight wasn't doing the right thing right away, was probably not the best thing for me. I should have because they ran for the hills anyway and just left me in the dust.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want to be attached to me, which I understand, but I would have thought there'd be a little more loyalty, but there wasn't. So, you know what, man? It was a wild story. I mean, things were just crazy. Anyway,
since I know the story, why don't you kind of jump to how long you were in the criminal justice system before you finally decided to fold?
Yeah, we had two prosecutorial appeals. So it took me 7 years from the time we tried to go to trial until the time it ended. And there could have been, I had a trial, but it was reversed. So 7 years later, I had an opportunity. The prosecutor lost their appeal, but they had the opportunity to retry me. And I was like, 7 years, 1.3 million, gray clouds. I've had to start 2 businesses and sell one because of the situation.
Yeah.
I told my wife, I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't go through another trial. I couldn't risk the 15 or 20 years they wanted to burn me for which I shouldn't even be doing anyway. I said, I just have to get this done. And she agreed with me. We came up with a plan. I hired an attorney, and they said, 2 years, you plead guilty. I said, I'm not pleading guilty. That's not coming out of my mouth. So at the end of the day, I took a plea it's called an Alford plea. It's like a no contest. And I went to prison for 48 months.
Where'd you serve?
State prison. Started at Shelton and then the rest of the time in Monroe. But hey, it was no fun. Obviously, it was not something I wouldn't want to do it again, but I wouldn't change a thing. I would not. It's something I'm glad I went through. I'm something my family struggled through it, but prevailed. I mean, my family's doing amazing. My wife is successful. My kids are all thriving. So we did a good job as a family.
Yeah.
And actually, I'll give accolades to the Department of Corrections. They went out of their way for me and my family. I mean, above and beyond for a lot than they do for most people to help us maintain as normal as situations. They let me celebrate birthdays in the administration conference room with my kids. I mean, just those extra things that made it more tolerable, right? More human. So, Jeff, it's where I learned a lot about myself and about people. My perspective of who I was going to see in prison is the same as everybody else's that watches.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Right. They're the garbage of society that needs to be flushed down the toilet or not associated with. Right. And that's what I went in with. My mindset was, I'm going to stick to myself. I'm not going to communicate with any of this garbage, and I'm just going to get through this. Right.
Yeah.
It wasn't 8 hours of being in prison that I started seeing humanity at a level I haven't experienced before.
A real community in there.
Well, guys that I didn't know that were looking out for me, helping me, reaching out about anything. There's nothing I could give them in return. Saying, I mean, we're in jail. I don't even know how anything works, right? And they have it's freezing. They're giving me blankets. They're telling me what not to do and what I can do, how to communicate, with the guards. I didn't know what a kite was. I mean, I'm looking to ring some buzzer to talk to somebody. I mean, I had no clue, right? Do I dial on the front desk? I mean, no clue at all. I got to tell you one funny thing, man.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is hysterical. When my wife drops me off, I have to turn myself in.
Yeah.
I go to turn myself in at the county jail. And I walk in, and the guy says, "Can I help you?" I said, "I'm here to have to turn myself in." He goes, "Name, David Israel." "All right. ID, please." I said, "I didn't bring my ID." He goes, "I can't let you in." I'm like, "Well, who would want to come? It's 4 years. It's 4 years." He goes, "I'm sorry." He goes, "Where's your ID?" And I came at the last minute. I had to turn myself in by 6. He goes, "Well, where's your ID?" I said, "It's at my house in Bellevue." He goes, "Okay." He goes, "How much time do you need to go get it?" I said, "Probably an hour." He goes, "How about I give you 6? I go, 6 more hours? He goes, he goes, "Take, my wife is with me." He goes, "Take it." So I'm like, anyway, I stop at Costco for a hot dog. We go home with ID. My wife and I have a little more time together. And then she drops me off. And now that area is closed, I have to go in the back gate. They let me in. And I'm walking down the hallway. They tell me to go to some desk. I get to the desk. The guy said, "Can I help you?" I said, "Yes." I said, they just told me to come to the desk. He goes, "Okay, you ready to check out?" He goes, "You done?" I said, "No, I just got here." Anyway, it was crazy, man. They're looking at me like, "What do you mean just got here?" I said, they thought I was at a meeting with myself. Anyway, the guy started helping me, and I started realizing that these people are not what I thought. But I learned that the whole way through, Jeff. I started seeing people, right now there's a lot about the Second Chance Initiative, which I spoke a lot on and I played a role in. But I kept telling these guys, the people that are out there preaching and trying to do this second chance, and I'm like, you know what? Most of these people never had a first chance.
Yeah, exactly.
So they don't need a second chance. I mean, they were victims of their environment. I met kids when I would speak at juvenile detention centers. I was part of this thing in my prison where we would go out and talk. And some kid came to me. He's like, "Man, can I stay in touch with you?" He was like 10 or 11. He's like, "I don't want to do this anymore. My mom sends me to steal food. She sends me to steal, tennis shoes." He goes, "I don't want to do that. I want to be like you." I go, "Well, I'm inside too, man. So maybe you don't want to be like me, but I understand what you're saying." I just started realizing there's a lot of victims of circumstance, environment, and really intelligent people that didn't want to be what they are, right? Yeah. They wanted to have the right track. Then I started to meet people when I got to minimum security, because I was going to be there for 3 years, or maybe 2.5 years, which is a long time for minimum security.
Yeah.
And I would meet guys that are getting out in a few months, and they would say, I don't want to do this anymore, David. I said, well, then don't. Go get a job. I'm going to do it. And you know what? A year later, they'd be back in, and I go, what happened? I mean, they were smart guys. They had the right mind. Well, I got a job, and one day I missed some payments for some support thing or another. He said my community corrections officer got my license suspended and I couldn't get to work.
Terrible.
And he goes, and after arguing, I lost my job. He goes, and he's like, screw it, man. I got to go back and do what I do. And it's those kinds of things. I'm like, man, we got to stop that, right? So I had actually, I just realized that there are some really smart people, brilliant, good guys, Mm-hmm. There's also the other section where they belong there. We need prisons, right? I mean, they're not going to change no matter what. But there are a lot. And I would say I don't want to throw numbers out there, but if I would just guesstimate 65% of the guys wanted to change their lives and do things and get on the right track for them, their family, and I wanted to provide that for them. So anyway, the rest of the story. I got out.
All right, let's jump to Spencer, and then we'll put the two. Okay. Then we'll put the two of you together, and we can kind of march forward. Yeah. So Spencer, you were an entrepreneur too before you went to prison.
I suppose so. I didn't quite think of it that way at that point in time, but yeah, I was. I was an entrepreneur with the wrong product. Then I started as a pretty young kid. Started hustling and selling a little bit of weed on the side, and still going to school and keeping up that front of walking the right path. But all the while, my mentors, as it were, I'm an only child, and my dad worked nights and everything, so we didn't see each other much. And the guys that I was looking up to, that's what they did. They sold drugs and they ran the streets. So I did that by night and went to school and had a little job by day, and did that for quite a while. I won't get into all the details of it. If somebody wants to hear more of the details, they can listen to my podcast. But ultimately, by the time I was 21, 22, the snowball got too big, and I was too busy running on the wrong side of the fence. And I got hit with a 10-year prison sentence for essentially, a bunch of stuff around selling and using drugs and having, living what I think a lot of people would call, I guess, kind of a normal criminal life, even though from the outside it didn't look like that. I was married. I had a great job. I was partners in an auto shop and had a house and all that stuff. Had all of the trappings of what a lot of people would consider the American dream until at 3:00 in the morning, one morning, there's a tank parked on my lawn and a SWAT team kicking in my door. Then I think the neighbors were questioning what the facade was all about after that.
I think the tank is probably a dead giveaway.
Oh, that was pretty crazy. I didn't know that was a thing outside of the Army, but apparently it is. So, having had a few brief encounters with the criminal justice system before that.
Yeah.
I think I had gotten to a point where I realized, like a lot of people that David was talking about just a minute ago, that I wanted something different, right? That's not who I really was meant to be. That's not who I wanted to be. And I was bound and determined to figure out who I wanted to be and make some damn good progress towards that while I was inside. And, I think I did a pretty good job of that. I got a college degree while I was in there. I figured out that I was an entrepreneur while I was in there. It was actually one of David's friends, who's now a mentor and friend of mine as well. Jim Donald came in. This is before I met David. Came in to give a talk at one of our classes and said, you guys are entrepreneurs. You're business people. You're out there selling a product. You're out there marketing a product. You're just choosing the wrong damn product. Like, figure it out. And David echoed the same thing later on. And once I finally realized that part of my restlessness and my hustle is just because that's the kind of person that I am. That's what gets me, I like that. But there's a way to do it as a legitimate business person, a legitimate entrepreneur that adds value to society rather than takes it away. That's what I wanted to spend my time learning how to do. But there wasn't a lot of opportunity to do that. The college is a nonprofit that was helping to facilitate college in prison at the prison that I was at, which was right next door to the one that David was in a few years before. They helped support me in getting people in to create kind of an entrepreneurship program. And David helped from the outside to facilitate that too. So anyway, getting a little bit ahead of the story. So David and I met when I was just trying to put together this entrepreneurship program inside. He came as a guest speaker at one of the college programs and told his story, which, you guys didn't hear half of it on this podcast. So definitely check out ours too. A little shameless plug. This story is amazing because, he took a situation that, a lot of people think is the worst damn thing that can happen to you and turned it into an opportunity to not only create something awesome for himself and his family, but to help other people coming out. He started a successful snack company, Pop Gourmet, that really did focus on hiring people to come in and work the manufacturing and some of them worked their way up to executive level. And he was right in the middle of a pretty successful run at that when I met him. And after I heard his story, I'm just like, man, I want what you've got. I want to be able to, grow into someone like who you are. So as he's walking out the door, I asked him if I could stay in touch, and he made the mistake of saying yes. And ever since, I don't think I've given the opportunity to shake me loose. And anyway, after that, we collaborated to create Harness Your Hustle, which was the entrepreneurship program inside prison. Did a few other things, worked on a few other things while I was still in there. And when I transitioned out to work release, he was just in a transition period away from out of Pop Gourmet and starting something new. And I don't know I don't know how much of it was me convincing him and how much was him wanting to give me an opportunity because he saw something in me. But he told me to come join the team and see if it worked out. And I think, looking back a little over 3 years now, it's worked out pretty well. And I've, not only do I still have the awesome mentor that I had even while I was inside, but I have somebody who's, one of my best friends and an amazing business partner too.
So if there's a teachable moment right here, because we all know that inside prison, it's like a think tank. People don't know that. People writing business plans, people writing books, people doing a lot of things you wouldn't necessarily expect in a prison. But it seems to me that here's the first real practice point, because you can be full of shame and be afraid to make the ask that you made, Spencer, because you got to step up and you got to tap David on the shoulder and say, hey, look, I'm here and I'd like to learn from you. I'd like to be like you. So how is it that you got past yourself to be able to do that in the middle of a 10-year bid?
A lot of work. And it wasn't, I got to be honest, I was nervous as hell. And, I wasn't particularly, I don't think anybody really is, but I wasn't particularly fond of rejection. And, didn't really want him to say, hey, that's nice, man, but I'm busy and sorry. Not that knowing, or not even the little bit that I knew of him just from the talk that he gave, not that was even an indication of something he would do, but there's always that fear, especially when, you don't live a life that inspires confidence in yourself for the first 20 years of your life. So, it took a while, man. It took small wins. It took, making progress toward that degree that I finally got after umpteen years, right before I was released. It took a lot of practice in Toastmasters. Toastmasters was a big part of my time in there, learning how to speak in public, learning how to.
That's what it is. I knew you were a Toastmasters guy.
Yeah, I've got my DTM plaque right next to me.
There's my National Speakers Association.
Oh yeah, perfect.
Yes.
If I wasn't so darn busy, I'd be a member. So it was all those little wins, and those wins came with me pushing myself outside of my comfort zone continuously.
Yeah.
And you learn after a while that if you're at a place where you're comfortable, then you're doing something wrong. You got to be a little bit uncomfortable. You got to get to a point. At least for me, I have to live at a point where I've always got a little bit of a feeling of butterflies in my stomach, right? Because it's not, for me, I've learned that it's just energy. It's not nervousness. It's not fear. It's just energy. And I can harness that as excitement and do something positive with it. So, when after I was blown away by David's story and there's a bunch of other people trying to talk to him and I'm like, well, how am I going to get a few minutes myself? You don't overthink it. You just step into it and say, harness the energy, harness the butterflies.
That's beautiful. So David, you come out of prison, and Spencer just said you already had one business that you were transitioning out of. So there was a business there. How, as now a guy who's been to prison, and let's assume that the person that we're talking to, our audience, is the person who's fresh out of prison, wants to know what is in the art of the possible, that doesn't really understand the difference between limited possibilities and unlimited possibilities, or limitless possibilities. And maybe you have scorched earth behind you. Maybe your reputation's been hurt. Maybe you've had some big investors like Costco and Starbucks, and so maybe that's going to mean other investors aren't going to look at you the same way. How do you decide? How do you launch?
Well, Jeff, first of all, one thing I will say is that your biggest obstacle when you come out is you. What's in your head, right? Because you can't change what anybody else thinks. You can't change the obstacles or the hurdles that are going to be in front of you that were set by our judicial system or people's perception. So you are your biggest obstacle, and you got to get it through your head that you can determine your own path forward. And you know what? Sometimes it's going to be bumpy. And you know what? Let me tell you this. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you've been a prisoner or not. You're going to have bumps in the road that you got to figure out. So I think for me, I wasn't going to get a job, at least not one that would help me take care of be part of my family and that I wanted to have. And so for me, I have to start a business, right? I wrote the plan for my snack company in prison, and my first popcorn product was called the Original Big House. So, it was really a fortunate ride and fast at my company, Popcorn May, because in my third month of business, I did a white truffle popcorn, and I heard Oprah liked white truffle, so I sent it back there, and she put it in her magazine and became a big fan. Really, they bolstered my business. They put us in the magazine 3 times, had me on her Live Your Best Life tour with her here in Seattle. So it was really, I got a lot of support. I got a lot of accolades in the press. So who starts reaching out to me after I started my company on credit cards? I charged them up. That's all I could do. But I was getting so much press and accolades for what I was doing with my business with Oprah, and then hiring hundreds of guys coming through work release. I started getting the guys who didn't want to associate with me, that invested with me at Pawn Exchange, started reaching out and saying, we'd like to invest. So, everybody wants to be a part of a good story, right?
People are fickle that way, aren't they? It's pretty crazy.
Funny how, they don't want to talk to you one day, the next day they want to get in your pocket.
What was your backstory part of the Popcorn Bay story? I mean, So when you were written about now as the pop gourmet guy, your prison story was all folded into that. Mm-hmm.
That Pop Gourmet was all based on that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was the purpose to hire guys, give them opportunities, give them a chance, as well as build a brand, right? And we did. We built it internationally. We had production in Russia. We had production in Japan. I mean, it grew very quickly over the 5 years that I built it. And, I just decided the more that I learned that the more I could just live my life and tell my story and own it, not worry about it, the easier it got. And not only that, the more positive it became, right? So when I started really raising capital, which was in 2014, I had one no from a private equity group there, and I had one no from a private investor. Everybody else wanted to be involved. Here at Good Planet, I started getting attacked and pelted by investors and funds. And some didn't even know this story, Jeff. It's funny. I would sit down with them in New York or in San Francisco with these high-level billion-dollar funds, and they would go, what a great story. I said, oh, I'm glad that you know my story. I said, I'm glad you know the Pop Gourmet background. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I said, did you Google me? And the fund managers would look at the analysts and they're like, no. Well, I would just lay it out, and I would tell them A to Z the story, just like probably more in depth than I'm telling today. And they would go, wow, what a resilient guy. What a transparent person you are. How confident. We want in.
And you're the most interesting guy in the room because these are just a bunch of finance heads, right?
You know what? But they didn't even consider, they didn't care about the felony or all the implications, or they were like, we want to be a part of this, right? So it just ended up being such a great positive that I always walked out with my head tall and felt like I could just be who I am and not have to hide. You know what I mean? So,
but David, how do you be standing on the street corner in Seattle? You're in Seattle now, right?
Yeah, Bellevue, but outside.
Bellevue, yeah, Bellevue. So how do you stand on the street corner one day, scratch your head and say, I think I want to get into vegan cheese? I mean, because it could be anything, right? It could be car wash. It could be anything. So why vegan cheese? And just be instructive to people who are coming out of prison that, it can be anything, but you got to have some sense about what the wave is in terms of product, the wave is in terms of financing. Yeah, take us through that just for a second.
Yeah, well, when I stepped aside I resigned from Pop Gourmet, we really, at that time, I started to do a lot of cleaner products, better for you, natural products there versus the decadent stuff. So I knew I wanted to do something that was really in the better for you kind of category. And about 7 months into late 2017, someone pointed out, my sister-in-law, that I should be looking at vegan cheese because vegan cheese sucks. And I'm like, I have no idea about vegan cheese. But the biggest complaint was it didn't melt and it didn't taste good. So looked at all the products, tested them. I'm like, I'm a simple thinker. I'm like, this can't be that difficult to make it. I mean, it's so bad. This is really going to be easy to improve this, right? So researched the market, started to understand things, thought vegan was a pretty good opportunity. Then I realized dairy-free was a bigger opportunity. And what I found was I identified a process in dairy cheese. They make something called analog out of dairy powders and oils. And I'm like, well, maybe that's a process we could probably replicate with plant-based materials. And I found a place in Greece. Actually, I found some place in Wisconsin first, but they didn't want anything to do with me because they didn't want to be in the vegan cheese business. So I did find a place in Greece, beautiful products that all they did was analog cheese. They're professionals, but they also made something for the Greek Orthodox holiday called vegan loaf. It's kind of like a bland American, but it really melted and had a great texture. So anyway, I reached out to them, formed a relationship, got an exclusive contract for plant-based products we would develop together worldwide except for 3 countries. And built, a core group of products that I knew the consumers would be attractive. You don't want to get too niche. Like I didn't want to come out with a brie or I want to be American cheddar, the things that people buy every day, right? And as I learned more about my consumer, it went from vegan to dairy-free to plant-based. And you need to understand, first of all, as for someone that's coming out, don't do something you can't do, or try to do something you can't do. You got to know that you can be successful or believe you can. Don't get too wild with something that's not going to make sense to people. So, I mean, you want to have something that has a broad appeal, or really can be, or is very innovative, that stands out, that doesn't exist. But it has to be something you can do on your own. This was coming pretty easily as I figured stuff out. But anyway, the plant-based thing, the other thing is, you need to understand your consumer. So you need to know who you're going to be selling either your product or services or your ideas to. So that's very important. You don't want to just do stuff and not know where to go. So I learned who our consumers were. And when I understood that they weren't vegans or dairy-free, our new consumer was the millennials, Gen Zs, Gen Xers that wanted products that were better for the planet and better for them. So I learned in my last company that consumers buy packaging and branding first. So I came up with Good Planet. I came up with a package I knew would step off the shelf. And then you have to have a great product because you capture that consumer. They got to like what's inside. And then it's a win, right? So that's how I built it. And, look, Spencer, when I knew he was going to work release, I mean, really didn't have anything. It was just me and an associate that were doing everything, but mostly me. And Spencer came, work release. I'm like, well, you know what? Why don't you come? You can help build some cubicles or something, and we'll find something for you to do, right?
Not kidding.
So Spencer's number 3 person in. Like when you hear like the number 3 person into Google or the number 3 person into Apple, Spencer's number 3 person in work release.
Yep. Well, maybe number 4. We just had brought on a sales guy to start building with us. But,
that's awesome.
But look, yes, Spencer was doing all kinds of stuff, but and I wasn't sure. Look, I mean, Spencer and I had talked to the phone. We had met. We met at the prison a few times. But look, I like to help people be successful. He reached out. If I could help, I'm going to help. At Pop Gourmet, my whole goal was to hire people that were coming through, give them opportunities through reentry, right? Yeah. That wasn't the goal here that wasn't part of my plan, a good plan, right? Where would they fit in? We're not manufacturing, we're sales and marketing. I mean, it's just, would I look at people? Of course, but it wasn't part of my plan. Mm-hmm. But I think after about 6 months, Spencer's starting to shine in all these areas where the other guys working there aren't. And those guys are starting to sweat, right? They're like, they're feeling intimidated by Spencer because Spencer's coming up with ideas or pointing things out that these guys should figure out, and they're not. And I'm going, boy, this guy, there's some potential here.
So the non-dairy cream is rising to the top.
Exactly. Big time. Listen, I will tell you, and I don't want to get off track, but I tell this to everybody. First of all, most of the people that I've met that have come out have been more loyal and grateful than anybody I've ever hired before. Okay, more committed on top of it. Mm-hmm. But I will say that it was serendipitous that I met Spencer because I've gone through a lot of people that have worked for me or tried to be my partner or ride my coattails or take me for a ride because I do everything and they want to just get the accolades. To a person, a partner that I could have never expected to have. Literally the best partner I've ever had is Spencer Oberg. Because at first I saw that he was smart and a go-getter and would do things and was thoughtful about, getting stuff done. He was committed. Right? He was grateful for the opportunity. But then he started taking the time to learn how I would do things. Mm-hmm. and do them that way, right? The way we talk to customers, the way we respond to customers, the way we follow up on stuff, how fast we respond to emails, all the things that are important in building a business, he started to do. Then, over the time, the trust factor comes in, where we're building this rapport, and I'm like, I can actually trust this guy. I mean, I don't have to keep a list and ask him if he did something. I don't have to check to see if he's doing something he shouldn't. The trust factor came in where I can be hands off and I can let Spencer do what he does, and I can go do what I do, and we can grow even faster. So, needless to say, one of the guys, our sales guy, resigned because he couldn't keep up with Spencer. And I'm telling you, that's the only reason. It's not, he has blown an opportunity like you can't believe, because he had equity, but he couldn't stand the competition because he couldn't keep up. So he resigned. He left. The other guy, Spencer started doing all the work that I wasn't doing, and the other guy didn't want to do the work. So he started freeloading on both of us. And one day I was just like, you know what? You can't be here anymore. You know, you can't say you're the COO and we see you twice a week and we're all doing your work. So I offered him a lower position, but his ego got in the way. So I had to tell him to go away. So Spencer's the one that rose to he rose to the top. He's been here every day, 24/7. Again, I like I said, I mean, he talks about, he didn't have to cling on. I mean, he didn't have to jump on and hang on. This is something that I was fortunate to find someone that I've needed in my business career, my life, for a very long time, that I never found before. So it's freed me up to do more, and we have been more successful. So I'm telling you, this business did more in its second year than my first company did in its fourth year, which was considered very successful. So this was a rocket ship, and that's why I was able to accomplish that. We were, because of the work that he was doing, and I was able to focus on what I like to do and I'm good at, versus get in the weeds, because Spencer was doing a lot of the work for me, so I could do what I needed to do. And the funds that came in, Jeff, they could care less about my background. They could care less about Spencer's background, or the other two guys that work here that were really 50% of the team initially. They were incarcerated. My first friend from prison, that I met in 2003, in the Chow Hall, works for us here as a partner. I mean, he's an amazing partner, and it's hard to believe that here we are again. But these are people that are loyal, grateful, trustworthy, and hard work and smart, right? Doers. I think what people don't understand, when I tell people about prison, is I was a pretty good entrepreneur before. I mean, I got stuff done, and I could create anything from jewelry to service companies to truck side advertising systems to whatever. And I was successful, right? Here, I don't sweat stuff anymore. I mean, you learn that you have to let go of stuff in prison. You can't control shit. It's going to happen. You just got to work your way through it and figure it out, right? It made me stronger, smarter, and helped me understand and appreciate people and what's important. So made me a better businessman, made me a better person. And the impact that I want to have, forget good planet, what we are doing for the climate and for people's health, but what we're doing for the community overall, with what Spencer, I do to give back, not just in helping people that are reentering our society, but I think, changing the community's perspective. Because sometimes I get asked to speak, and they don't tell the audience that I was incarcerated. They want me to drop the bomb, because it's that surprise of that you don't fit the profile, right? I mean, I have a company, I work with funds, I deal with the former CEO of McDonald's, and there are all these other guys, the owner of this and that, and they're like, and then I say I was incarcerated, they're like, holy cow. It just helps people understand that don't judge, don't paint a picture of people. And even if you do, don't judge them, because they're very probably extremely intelligent and really want to, just because they dress a certain way or look a certain way, doesn't mean they shouldn't be a part of our community and be respected. Or given an opportunity, right?
That's exactly.
So Spencer, let me frame this question the right way. So now you're holding on to a rocket ship, right? You've been given the chance of a life. You're part of that launch. You've been given this chance, and Phil, you have to subscribe to a way of doing things that's very particular, that is not something that you've necessarily been trained for. You have to adapt, and then you also have like a bigger purpose in mind. How do you go from being on work release to being a super full-time, passionate guy about this? And then how do you wind up getting the idea for Unincarcerated? How does that happen?
The idea for Unincarcerated started in prison when David came up with the idea of doing a Shark Tank in prison style show, kind of in collaboration with what we were doing with the entrepreneurship program. So, I mean, the seeds were planted a long time ago, and it was something that we've been working on kind of in the background here and there. But he was on the back burner for quite a while because when it's a couple of us effectively doing the work to build what's now a multi-million dollar company with 20 employees. And David mentioned some of the people that we work with and do business with on a day-to-day basis. And it's insane. It's the biggest companies, the biggest people in food in the world. And, admittedly, you don't have a heck of a lot of free time when you're doing that, but it's always been a passion of mine to really scale exactly what David was talking about and shifting the public paradigm, shifting this country's perspective on people like us, on people who have been in prison, people who have a criminal record. I don't fit the bill myself. Anytime I'm sitting next to somebody on a plane and telling them my story, as soon as I get to that point, it's a very similar reaction to what David gets when he's talking to investors. It's and that mind blown moment is what we want to recreate for people who don't have the opportunity to either come into prison and experience it firsthand, which is where I saw a lot of guests who came in be transformed as the guys in there are at the same time having a similar experience. Or when somebody's meeting by chance, David or I or someone like us in the community, we want to scale that. And that's what Unincarcerated Productions is really about. It's about taking these stories, taking these concepts for TV shows, podcasts, other forms of media, and making that experience accessible to everyone across the country and doing it in a way that's really engaging, inspiring, and entertaining. So that when people encounter someone like us, or when they think about who a prisoner is, who an ex-con is, or a formerly justice involved, whatever word you want to use to describe us, unincarcerated, as far as I'm concerned. Whenever they think about that, they don't think about who they see on the nightly news, who has gotten out and done something terrible, or, they don't think of Lockup Raw or these other very prominent in our society media portrayals of people in prison and the prison system, but they think of the real human beings and the real amazing stories like David's, like mine, that happen, that are all around them in this country. And that in and of itself creates opportunity, because people who are now in a position of power, people who are in a position to give other people an opportunity, like David gave me an opportunity, will do that. They'll feel more moved to open up their whatever their business is or whatever their opportunity is to people, so that they don't have to keep doing that revolving door like that poor guy that David was talking about earlier.
Many of them. It's a vicious circle, right?
Let me tell you what's resonating about both of these pieces for me. Because I was a lawyer. I was general counsel to some large companies. And but they're still closely held. They're family-owned businesses, but very successful. And when you represent family-owned businesses, that means you also represent the family. So I was doing mergers and acquisition during the day, and at night, if one of their kids got pulled over in their Porsche at 110 miles an hour with a bag of blow in the back, I got that call too. Right? So that's just the kind of the way it was. Well, I couldn't do that anymore. You know, I went to prison, obviously. And when I came out, I'm still that helper, you know, I'm still that guy who wants, that's my calling. That's what I know how to do. I just had to do it differently. And so that's the lead up to what I find most fascinating. It's because I work with people who are underwater and can't breathe. And I get them to the surface. And that's what I've been doing for 40 years. But once you get to the surface and they got to soar, you know, once they get to the surface and now it's time to do what you guys do, I'm not that guy. You know what I mean? I'm the only reason I've been able to build a ministry is because I know what I do is help people who are drowning. And so it took me years to figure that out. You know, that I got to be true to myself and I have to understand what makes me get up in the morning, what makes me tick. And so I've given up trying to force myself into being what you would call an entrepreneur. You know what I mean? And that I get to do what I love every single day. And so I wish I could have you two work on my business plan. But the point is, is that, yeah, of course. But the point is that everybody has to be authentic to themselves.
Yep.
Not everybody's a David Israel. Not everybody's a Spencer Oberg. And certainly not everybody's a Jeff Grant. But most people, I think when they come out, they don't know who they are anymore. So what about that? I mean, how do you, what do you do? What was true in your case? And what do you do when someone comes to you and says, I really need some help and I can't figure it out. I'm in my own way.
For me, I mean, it's so true the way that David expressed it and the way that you just expressed it too. I mean, I have been the one who's got in my way the most. I was the one, and in some cases still am, right? It's not just flipping a switch when you get out to being able to feel comfortable in your own skin, to be able to feel confident in who you are and what your calling is and where you're going. It takes time, effort, work, and sometimes it just takes you making the next step and seeing what reveals itself, right? So when you're driving in the fog, you can't see 10 exits down the road. You know, maybe you can only see a few car lengths. You just have to focus on what's in front of you, the opportunities that are in front of you, and make the most out of every moment and learn and grow through those experiences as you go. You know, it took me a long time to be confident that having the impact that I want to have through Unincarcerated and other work on society as a whole regarding the criminal justice system, it took me a long time to figure that out. And it took me a long time to be okay with sharing my story and with being authentically me and not worrying about what judgment I may or may not get. And incidentally, every time that I share my story, it's always an overwhelmingly positive response that I get. It's always, oh my God, you know, that's so amazing what you've done, how resilient you are, how passionate you are, and how you're giving back. It's never, wow, you were just a piece of crap, and you know you should still be in prison. Some people might think that, I don't know, but their thoughts aren't my problem.
But Spencer, when you say it took a long time, what's a long time? Because when a guy gets out of prison or a woman gets out of prison, pretty much from my experience, they're in survival mode. You know, like within X amount of weeks, I have to make a child support payment, or I have to get an apartment. I have to pay rent. So how do you mediate all those things? How can you really follow your dream, which is higher order thinking, at the same time be realistic about, there's rent to pay in 30 days. And David, David, I think you could probably answer this because you're a guy who's always in motion. So, So what about the person who comes out of prison and has to handle all of those things at once?
Personally, I think it's a balance. I think it's a balance. You have to meet your needs, but you can't let go of your dreams and your passions. Mm-hmm. But sometimes they have to take a back burner, and you have to focus on building a foundation that you can use to launch your dreams and your passions. Because, if you just go chasing something and blow off the responsibilities that you have and that you need to attend to if you're going to survive and take care of your family, well, then, it's not going to work out for you.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming, right? I understand. I saw it too many times. A lot of great guys we don't make it easy for people to be released and come home. Some are more fortunate than others. They have family or friends. Some get dumped off with $60 and a toothbrush and one outfit, right? And the hurdle of finding a place to live, because a lot of places won't even let you move in if you have something on your record. So that's where we need to change things, right? If we expect people to come back and not get caught up again in crime and want them to be successful and a valued part of our society, we need to give them the opportunity to do so. Not be there with a bat and beat them down or turn our backs on them. We need to say, you know what? Okay, you made a mistake or you didn't. You've been to prison, and now you're back, and you're supposed to get back on track, right? Do the right thing. We got to support each other and help each other, and that's part of what drives me and my passion is to get the society to open their eyes, their minds, and their hearts to being welcoming and saying, let's support not just people that are being, that have been incarcerated, but together. We all need to work together. At the end of the day, we're going to be successful. We have to work together. That's a philosophy here at our company that I've learned. The egos are gone. We all work together. Let's have a good time and be successful. You want to see everybody else be successful. It's not all about you. So that's where we need to be. That's a big thing, big ask, but we'll be a much better place. But we need to change how we treat people coming home. Instead of trying to trip them up, we need to help build them up and get on the right track, right?
That's beautiful. I would love if the two of you would consider attending. Next Monday night is the 250th meeting of our white collar support group.
Wow.
And so that's 5 years of weekly meetings. So love to invite the two of you and at some point in the near future to be guest speakers on that support group call as well, because then it's real questions and answers and we can dig into this. Any last, what are takeaways? Because I want to be respectful of your time, Spencer. I know you have a meeting coming up. Last takeaways and your contact information for both Good Planet Foods and for Unincarcerated. Spencer, why don't you go first? Just takeaways and contact information. We'll go to David, and then we'll sign out.
Right. I think the biggest takeaway is to take a chance on yourself and keep daring to believe that you're worth success, and whatever your version of success is. Mm-hmm. Jeff, you mentioned that you get to do what you love every single day. To me, that is success. And for somebody who's in a situation where they're coming out of prison or a situation where maybe they're facing going into prison, it's easy to question your worth, and it's easy to question whether it was for me anyway, easy to question whether I was worthy of the life that I envisioned for myself. So my takeaway is to get out of your own way and to know that everybody makes mistakes. And, it doesn't mean you have to be proud of those mistakes, but you can be proud of who those mistakes lead you to become and where they take you in life, and to lean into whatever it is that you're going through. Focus on that next step in front of you, and just be the best version of you that you can be in that moment, and good things will happen. I mean, amazing things continue to happen to me that when I went into prison, I certainly didn't believe were possible. And when I came out, maybe I even questioned whether they were possible or whether I was worthy of those opportunities and those just the amazing things. But I absolutely am, and so is everybody else. And that's my takeaway. Don't be your own biggest enemy. Don't be your own worst enemy. Be your biggest fan, without getting into too much ego or being a jerk about it.
I like that. Contact information.
Well, you can contact me at email at spencer@unincarcerated.com. You can check out the unincarcerated.com website. You can follow Unincarcerated on Instagram. And you can, of course, find us at goodplanetfoods.com and follow Good Planet on Instagram and LinkedIn and all the other platforms as well. So we'd love to hear from everybody. Shoot me an email or get at me through one of those websites or one of the social platforms. And you can follow me personally on those too. I'm on Instagram at Spencer Oberg.
Sure.
And the others, but probably more active Instagram and LinkedIn.
Thanks, Spencer. David, takeaways, contact information.
Yeah. Listen, I live by the mantra that everything happens for a reason, and it's just what you deal with it. Don't be overwhelmed. Don't give up. You can always find a better place. And I think if you look back, you'll see that when you've had something happen, you end up in a better place anyway, right? So I kind of like to roll with the punches. I learned this, like I said, I wouldn't change anything just wouldn't. I mean, I can't. You want to move forward and learn from what your past has taught you. Everybody's going to have problems. So it's not just you. It's not just me. No matter who you are in this world, Bezos, Gates, whoever you think, the celebrities, they all have problems, and they may be worse than yours. So, like I said, you just take what you can, learn from it, move forward in a positive way that isn't selfish, but that forwards you and creates progress. You got to work for a win-win. If it's about you, you're going to lose. So, you know what I mean? I just, again, to me, it's about everybody working together and being happy for others' success, because it pays dividends and it drives you on. So there's nothing you can't do. We're proof. And there's a lot of other people out there that have proven that as well,
sure.
That have had health issues or any kinds of other things that attack you, right? So going to prison is okay compared to having cancer or losing a limb. There's all kinds of terrible things. So like I said, everything happens for a reason. We can use that to move forward and be more successful.
Love the contact information, David.
Yeah, D Israel, ISRAEL at goodplanetfoods.com.
David, Spencer, thank you. You've been tremendous guests. And thank you. And I look forward to more chapters of the Unincarcerated podcast, because I found them really, really helpful and fascinating. So thank you for being our guest, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us on White Collar Week, sponsored by Progressive Prison Ministries. You can learn more about us on our website, prisonist.org. That's prisonist like feminist. And please remember to rate, review, and share this podcast so that families suffering in silence can find us if they need us. See you next time.